Hello and welcome to the Health Source podcast, your source for all things health, wellness, and lifestyle inspo. I'm your host, Beck Russell, health and life coach and the author of Life in the Soul Lane. Through conscious conversations, our aim is to inspire and empower you to live your most well, happy, and vibrant life. If you're ready to elevate your well-being, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Health Source podcast. I am beyond excited to share today's episode with you because I am in conversation with the incredible Hollie Azzopardi to celebrate the launch of her new book, Saying Yes to You. Now, I have been in Hollie's world for, I'm going to say, we reckon it's about 5 or 6 years, somewhere around there, when I first came across Hollie and her work. And it all started when I did Hollie's program that she used to run called Manifestation and Magic. And that really was one of the really big gateways for me to go on this big personal development journey all those years ago. So I'm so grateful for Hollie to share her amazing work in the world and to shine her light, which you're going to hear all about. So Hollie is a best-selling author of The People Pleaser's Guide to Putting Yourself First and the host of the podcast Soul Talk. Hollie is a leading Australian voice in personal and spiritual development. As well as being a stay-at-home mum, she also works as a model, freelance writer, and speaker. In her spare time, Hollie is an active participant in community theatre and loves a warm cacao, a good book, and spending time with her husband, her daughter, and her bulldog baby, Lola. So as you can see, there's not much that Hollie can't do. She is definitely a multi-talented, multi-skilled, and multi-passionate woman, which I am so excited for you to learn a little bit more about. So in this conversation, we cover so many things. We dive deep into some of the really foundational pillars that we can use to cultivate better health and well-being in our physical body. We also talk about ways that we can connect or reconnect to our authentic self and give ourselves full permission to shine, which is something that a lot of us can really struggle with from time to time. We also talk about how we can tune in and give ourselves that time and space and build this really deep sense of intuition and self-awareness to know what we need in any given moment. We also talk about slowing down and how that's not really, it's quite frowned upon and there's not much space or appreciation for it in our modern world. So why it's so important for us to do that and how we can give ourselves permission to do that. And so much more. It is a big, juicy conversation. So I'm excited for you to tune in. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Hollie and let's talk all things saying yes to you. Hollie, welcome to the Health Source podcast.
Thank you for having me, Beck. As you can hear in my voice, I am very excited.
I'm very excited to have you here. And in my introduction to Hollie, you guys will hear all about Hollie and her magic and what she does. And we've been in our world, each other's worlds now for, I'm going to say 5 years, at least 5 years since I came into your Manifestation and Magic program, which honestly changed my life, was sort of, the catalyst for everything else that followed on. So I'm so grateful to have you here, Hol.
Oh, Beck, I just am so grateful. It's an honor to talk to someone who is like, we're known to each other. We support each other's work. We've been each other's worlds. I was going to say 7 years. So 5 years feels like the average.
Maybe like 5 or 6. Yeah.
5 or 6 years. We can say 6. And it's just, I'm very excited to be chatting with you today.
Likewise. And before we get into the juice of today, we've got Hollie here today on the podcast to talk all things her new book, which I'm so excited about. Yay. But before we dive in, Hollie, I just wanted to ask you, I don't know, a little bit more about you and some of the things, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this soon, but some of the things that keep you really happy and healthy in your life, any rituals, routines, practices, whatever,
I love this question. I'm all about the ritual. I have lots of Virgo in my chart, in my natal chart. So I'm all about like the routines and the rituals that make me feel amazing. And The big one, if you've been in my world for a long time, you'll know, is cacao. I am an avid user and worker with cacao in a ceremonial context. But even more than that, I love to have first thing in the morning my warm cacao outside, sun on my face, feet on the earth. It's just such a beautiful grounding practice for me to drop into my body. And obviously, all of the beautiful benefits to my circadian rhythm when I'm getting that morning sunlight on my face first thing, my feet on the earth, like the practices that I tend to really lean on daily involve some form of warm cacao and nature in some way. We have recently relocated, so we've moved closer to the beach and the ocean. So getting my feet on the sand every day, unless you're in a cyclone, obviously, which has been the last week, but for most days, getting in the ocean, like all of these beautiful, simple practices that connect me with the earth are the things that really bring me into my body. So, and I like to start my day in those practices so that I can leverage on the peace and the connection that that gives me. So yeah, I can leverage that throughout the day. So they're my big ones, cacao and some form of nature. Yeah.
Oh, that's just perfect. I mean, who could who could want more out of life than that? I can totally relate to, yeah, just connecting with nature, and it doesn't have to be some complicated ritual. It's literally feet on the earth, turn your face to the sky, to the sun. And we were just briefly talking off camera about our work with cacao. And so we might even dive deeper into that at some stage throughout our conversation today. But
Beautiful.
we are here to talk all things your new book, which I'm so excited about. It's just about to be released in the next couple of weeks, so
Yeah.
everyone can grab a copy and dive into all of the lessons and the learnings that you've shared. But just to give us some context for the listeners, and you can go as far into this as you want, Whole, but a lot of the lessons that you've shared throughout the pages of this book have come from some really big things that you've traversed over the last couple of years. So if there's anything that you want to dive into, just to give us a little bit of an overview, some context about, some of the big life challenges and initiations that you've gone through. And then from there, you've been able to really extract this gold and share it with all of us throughout this book.
Yeah, it's been a huge few years. And when I was writing, you'll see in the book that it's kind of like a timeline of events over 2 years. And that timeline has continued of really big life upheaval moments. So the catalyst for me was my transition into motherhood. And I will precursor that by saying that this book isn't about motherhood. It's about any big catalyst you've experienced in your life. That could be becoming a mother for the first time, but it might not be. It might be walking with grief, losing a job, ending a relationship, any big moment that leaves you questioning who you are and your identity. And the first chapter in the book is Who Am I? Because that was kind of the starting point for me. Was I became a mother and everything I had recognized as me fell away. And so, off the back of this matrescence piece, becoming a mother, I experienced a multitude of challenges. I had postpartum depression for quite a while. I had a really traumatic birth. I had a really traumatic breastfeeding experience, which it sounds absurd to even label something like breastfeeding as traumatic. And unless you've experienced that, you don't quite comprehend it. I know I didn't before I was in it myself, but all of this led to something that I explore in the book known as complex PTSD or compounding trauma. And so what ended up happening in this transition into matrescence and the traumas I faced in that experience were all of the other traumas I'd experienced in my life. And I had a very tumultuous upbringing that I had not fully expressed, were packed down. And when anyone experiences a complex trauma or a compounding trauma, it's almost like your system can't hold the compression of the traumas anymore. They've built up on top of each other. They have nowhere to go. So they start spilling out. And I didn't know that that's what was happening to me until after the fact. But that was what happened in my first year of motherhood. Was I was faced with complex PTSD and compound trauma. off the back of all of this multitude of traumas, we also had a friend in a tragic accident that left him in a coma for, I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks. So every day we were waking up waiting to hear, is he awake? Has he passed away? On top of that, as part of my own healing, I ended my relationship with my dad, which was and still is the most difficult decision I've had to make in choosing myself, but a necessary one nonetheless. We also had, where we were living, we were in a regional town in northern New South Wales. And within this first couple of years of motherhood, while I'm navigating all of these complex stress points, our closest neighbor across the road ended up shutting the entire town down because he had built bombs and was stockpiling rifles and threatening to set all of those off. So it was just thing on top of thing on top of thing. At the same time, my physical body, I mean, of course, it was so unwell because I was so inflamed. I was so stressed. I also started to experience chronic illness. So, hypothyroidism is what I am still navigating to this day. And I started to join the dots between autoimmune conditions and chronic illness, compound trauma and stress, and physical manifestations in the body, and how this can all be pinpointed to a traumatic childhood. And so that actually is kind of the premise of this book. Was there are so many of us walking around with some form of autoimmune condition or chronic illness or PTSD, anxiety, whatever the thing is. And a lot of the time it can be pinpointed to experiences that we haven't wanted to look at or revisit because they're deeply traumatizing. And so this book was an exploration to my own rebuilding. When every part of me crumbled, when every part of me was no longer there and I was left as a shell, how did I build myself up, but not just build myself up again to be able to function? How did I build myself up again to be able to thrive and to be able to shine back in my life? And it's taken 3 years, but I can stand by every lesson that I share in the book because I was unraveling as I was writing. And so that leads me to where I am today. My body is physically healing. I'm living in a home that feels really nourishing and amazing. I have a thriving relationship with my partner. As a mother, I feel more in alignment than I ever have previously, and things are getting better and better. And so I guess that is the nature of the book, is when every part of you falls away and there is nothing left, how do you pick up the pieces and become more you than you ever have before?
Wow, it's just the perfect storm, really, wasn't it, for you during that time of so many
Yeah.
things? And when you're in those times, it's like, even if you have, you're in the work, you're doing the things, but it's still hard, even if you have a positive mindset and you know all these things logically, it's still really, really hard to navigate. And so I just want to honor you for,
Thank you.
getting through that period and extracting the lessons and sharing them with us inside this book. But you did just touch on some of the physical challenges that you traverse. So I'd like to go into that a little bit deeper now, because you do share some of the things that really helped you. So I know that this is obviously so unique to all of us. But were there a few standout pieces or modalities on things that really helped you personally? And also, you did touch on as well, I just wanted to kind of extract that out, how you were making the links between certain physical manifestations in the body stemming from, trauma, extending, coming from like emotions. And I just wanted to highlight that because sometimes we don't always join the dots between the fact that, I mean, we are energy beings, we are emotional beings. And so, of course, when there's an imbalance in that sphere of our body, it's going to manifest usually as the last port of call in the physical body. So I'd love for you to kind of expand on that a little bit as well. And if you wanted to share
Yeah.
any main pieces that really helped you during that time.
Yeah, of course. So, what was really interesting for me, Beck, is I was joining the dots in my head. I was looking at every person in my life like me who had some form of chronic illness or autoimmune condition, some sort of inflammatory response in their physical body. And then I was curiously joining the dots and going, well, I know that person also had a traumatic childhood. My sister, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in her 20s. You know, I have hypothyroidism and also psoriasis. So, chronic illness in both of us in adulthood, and we've both had the same very similar childhoods that were deeply in trauma. And so I was like, okay, well, there I can see a pattern here. Is there anything evidenced? Because we know this in the work we do, as you said, Beck. Like we know that emotion is energy in motion. If the emotion isn't moving, the energy stagnates, and then that's when disease is created in the body. We have teachers like Louise Hay who've been speaking about this since the 70s. But I knew to write this book, I needed scientific evidence. And what's really fascinating is the science is catching up. It's a little bit behind, but it is catching up. And one of the pieces of science that I reference in the book is actually this research paper that has a look at it's your ACE score. So it's the Adverse Childhood Experiences score. Basically, the higher your score is in the ACEs, and you can find that out online. It's things like, emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect, these sorts of things. The higher your ACE score, the more likely you are to develop an autoimmune condition or a chronic illness. So the science is there that evidences some form of inflammatory response in the physical body that is developed as a result of a traumatic upbringing. There is also science that evidences that a child in a traumatic environment is already experiencing sensations of PTSD in their body even before the fact, because PTSD is obviously post-traumatic event, but in experiences of conflict or heavy energy density, it's already manifesting as PTSD. So I was looking at all of this research, and I also in the book, in the early parts of the book, talked to a somatic therapist, Eleanor Danks, who specializes in trauma. And she explains, trauma for one person is different to another person. We think of trauma as one big horrific event, but it can actually be lots of different micro traumas through our lives as well. So that was just really interesting for me to actually join those dots and go, okay, X plus Y does equal Z. This is why I'm experiencing this. My body is in an inflammatory response. And my first point was, okay, I need to look at my nervous system, because my nervous system is not regulated. And the more that I experience life, because life is going to throw us a multitude of curveballs, my nervous system needs to have the capacity to expand and hold big things, small things, multiple things all at the same time. And so that's when I started to enlist the experts. And the first people that I started to speak to from a physical standpoint were a functional nutritionist and someone also who specializes in like brain health and like neurological function. And so when I sat down with Chantel, when I sat down with Britt, we were looking at the basics, the things like getting morning sun on my face when I wake up in the morning, because that is going to impact my quality of sleep. The things like, how is my bed set up for me to get the most solid sleep when I do go to bed at night? My quality of hydration, not just the quality of the water that I'm drinking, but the added electrolytes that I'm putting into my water so that my cells are actually rejuvenating and feeling hydrated. Like, we're talking the basics here, Beck, like sun, sleep, water, and then nourishment, nutrition. Now, what's really interesting about the nutrition part is so many of my identity labels had to fall away in writing this book, because protein is actually the biggest piece when it comes to regulating your nervous system, your intake of protein, the quality of protein you're eating. And this is someone who for 17 years was a pescatarian. I didn't eat red meat. I didn't eat chicken. It was something that I speak about in the book when I was 16 years old, until I had my little girl and started feeding her meat and started craving meat. And what I learned working with the functional nutritionist, Chantel, was that the quality of protein I was getting was lacking. And so my nervous system was constantly in a state of anxiety and fight and flight. And so I actually needed to up my protein significantly. And so I speak about that in the book as well. And, you might be listening to this and you are a vegetarian, you are a vegan, and that's absolutely fine in your choice. It's just recognizing that there is a substantial amount of protein our physical bodies need to feel regulated at a base level. And then we can do the other things from there. So really what stood out to me was, oh, I've got to start at the bare essentials. I've got to start at the way I'm fueling my body, the way I'm watering my body, the sun that I'm getting, and the sleep that I'm getting. Once I had that sorted, then I could move on to the other practices, which are all amazing. I speak about breath work, EFT, journaling, chiropractic care, somatic therapy, trauma release, shape, like all of it. And I did do all of it and I still do all of it. But I think oftentimes we can look at like, what's the most extreme or what's the fanciest thing or what's the most Instagrammable thing? It's like, well, I'm going to go straight into doing Wim Hof and an ice bath. And it's like, hang on a second, that could actually be creating more stress, more tension in the nervous system than actually are you getting your morning sun and are you eating enough protein? So I started at the bare essentials and built from there.
I think it's such a beautiful reminder because, like you said, especially being bombarded on the internet of like, do this thing or try this thing. And it's like, how about we just go back to basics? Because a lot of us are so busy, especially if we have families and careers and that kind of thing. And it can be easy for those base level things to just fall away. So it's like, how can we strip it back? How can we come back to some simplicity? And how can we just tend to ourselves at that base level first? And sometimes that might be all people need if they are
Yes.
moving through a challenge.
Yeah, it's a reminder that it doesn't need to be complicated. And I know that it can get so noisy because every person, as you said, has different needs. But the purpose of the way that I've written this book is this is the literal place to start for any person going through a crisis because these are the baselines. And then you can build from there. The other thing that was really important to me is any practice that I shared, any recommendation that I shared, I wanted it to be readily available and accessible to any reader. So majority of them are very easy and free because I don't want people to think they have to go and spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars to regulate their nervous system. Don't get me wrong, having a chronic illness or an autoimmune condition does cost a lot of money, especially if you're seeing certain practitioners like I do. And so you don't want to add to that financial load. So, there are things like music. There's a whole section on music, the kinds of music we want to be listening to when we want to be listening to that music. That costs nothing. Similarly, decluttering. I went through a whole declutter thing and like cleanliness. It's such a regulator of the nervous system. We forget it or we don't prioritize it. Neuroaesthetics, beauty. There's science behind why beauty is like nervous system regulator. So flowers in the home cost a very small amount, but actually are healing you from the ground up. So it's almost like reinventing the wheel where, yes, you can go out and do the drastic big things, but also can you just take a look around your home, the environment you're in, the day-to-day practices you have in your life, and how can you just up level them a little bit with yourself and your own stress levels and nervous system at the forefront. And then once you do that thing, how do you continue to do that thing over time?
Absolutely. Oh, that's just such a good reminder. Yeah, just start the basics. And like you said, it is something that has to continue over time too. It's like you can't just do it once and expect things
Yeah,
to
I've got
transform,
like flowers in my house for like a week. I'm sorted. Like, no. And they also they all feed into one another. So it's like do all of the things and watch how your life kind of, starts to hold you from there. It's not enough to just listen to some nice music for one bathtub, one bath time, one night. It takes time.
It's a devotion to
Yes,
rewiring your nervous system and letting your body feel safe.
exactly. That's exactly what it is.
So as well as the physical stuff, I think that it's also really important, and you're so good at this, Holly, which is why I'd love for you to speak to this a little bit. But as well as the physical stuff, I think a big part of it too is for us to be able to connect to our intuition and have this really deep sense of self-awareness for us to know what we need in any given moment. So, do you have any advice for anyone who maybe this is a new concept to them, or if they struggle to connect with their intuition and their body wisdom to know what they need to do?
Yeah, it's really hard. And to be honest, even as someone who, teaches this and practices this, when I was in that first year of motherhood, I lost my ability to do all of that because I was in such a state of survival and fear that I was valuing everyone else's experiences above my own trust. And I forgot, I didn't even forget what it was like. It's just that I didn't prioritize what I felt in my body versus someone else's opinion, someone else's idea. Like there were nights in the early stages where I was on Google forums, which I would never recommend anyone in my life to go down rabbit holes when they're in a crisis. But that's where I found myself. And it's because I just stopped trusting in my body. And I think that that's the first and the most important piece. No matter where you are on your journey of living intuitively or living in tune with you and developing that level of self-awareness, is developing that deep trust in yourself, what you feel, what you know. And the way that we develop trust in ourselves is we follow through with the commitments we make for ourselves. So that could be as simple as, you've listened to this podcast, a commitment you make is that I am going to go outside every morning and get the sun on my face. You can tell yourself that, and it's whether you actually follow through on that or not that will start to strengthen trust in your system. Deeper ways that we can do this is starting to sit with ourselves more, because often when life is busy and noisy, it's very easy to not prioritize sitting with self. And that doesn't need to be 20 minutes of Vedic meditation. I haven't been able to do that since I've become a mother. It was something that I definitely spoke to beforehand. I don't have the capacity or the time for that right now. And that is literally not me not prioritizing it. It's just the reality. And so it could be as simple as 5 minutes journaling before you go to bed at night. But there has to be some mode of sitting with self to actually gauge an understanding of who you are and what you need. I speak about this in the book. I interviewed Dr. Sharina. I don't know if many people follow her. I mean, she's almost got 500,000 followers since I interviewed her. Like, she's blown up, and she's a nervous system expert. And her number one, I asked her, what is your number one tool or practice for any person to regulate their nervous system? And she said journaling. And so there's a whole section on my book about journaling. Already there was going to be, as you know, Beck, you've sat my courses, journaling has always been a thing. But to speak to someone who is held of such high regard in the context of true nervous system regulation, she explains that when you sit with yourself and your thoughts, you start to establish an understanding of what you need. It's that simple. Now, there's no right or wrong way to journal. I unpack that in my book. If you're thinking, how do I do it? It's all there. But the thing to think about is, if you want to get an understanding of what you need, what your body's telling you, who you are, you actually have to sit with yourself and listen to her. So the simplest way to do that is to follow through on the commitments you make for yourself and to pick up the pen and start writing. And you are going to start to uncover what you need over time. And this doesn't happen in one session or a week's worth of journaling. This is an ongoing practice. I've just been through a really challenging personal experience with someone very close to me. And it's involved a very huge component of grief coming up. The easiest thing for me to do is to turn away from that, not sit with that, not look at that. But I have made a commitment to myself that I'm not journaling every day, but every few days I'm picking up the pen, I'm taking it to paper. I'm very interested in what I actually have to say when I'm sitting with myself. And so I think often we can dismiss a practice as simple as that, or we can say, I'm not a writer, or, oh no, journaling's not for me. But what you're actually saying in that is that you're not willing to sit with yourself and listen to what you have to say, because there's always something there when you move through the resistance.
And what could be, excuse me, what could be more important than listening to what your soul wants to communicate with you, don't downplay your own internal wisdom.
Yes, I think it's easier to outsource. And we're in a society that loves to outsource. What does this person have to say? I had it today. I had someone DM me and say, hey, Hol, I'm going through this experience. I really value your opinion. What would you do? And my reply was, no, what would you do? Because that you have the answers every time. It doesn't mean you don't have to appreciate or respect or value other people's opinions, but your opinion is always there, and your gut feeling about something, the physical sensations in your body that tell you a yes or a no. There's actually a meditation on Insight Timer that I facilitate that goes through that exact practice, which I wrote for my first book, which is like, how do I know what's a yes or no in my body? Because sometimes we can get confused by that too. So these really simple practices are ways to start to value what we have to say for ourselves versus pedestaling or prioritizing someone else because they're not you. They haven't walked your path. They don't actually know the intricacies and details of your history or what works. And so it's about valuing what feels right for you, and also calling yourself out when you are, almost copying yourself out when you're saying, oh, I can't do that. It's like, hang on a second, what's underneath that? And have I actually given myself the opportunity to sit with myself here?
And all of this lends itself to slowing down, which is what I want to talk to you next about, because you and I are both advocates for this. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in at the moment, there's not much space for that. It's not sort of appreciated to do that.
Mm.
And I'd love to ask you why you think that is, and also how we can give ourselves permission to slow down a little bit more.
Mm. It's something that it's a lesson I constantly have to learn. So even my word for the year is slow. And it's like, hang on, I just literally wrote a book and the byline is slow down, tune in, shine bright. Like, shouldn't I have slow down like nailed? No. It's something that I constantly have to remind myself. And I do believe that a big part of why we are more inclined to rush through our lives and be busy and, juggle a multitude of things all at once and not value slow is it's society. It's a societal norm. It's a societal construct that is celebrated. It's deeply rooted in patriarchal beliefs that to be busy, to work inverted commas hard is the way to go. It's deeply rooted in, I believe, if we wanted to talk about patriarchy and like misogyny, I think it's very anti the way of women and feminine flow. And that doesn't mean that we can't work hard and be busy. I'm a mom. Like, I fully get it. Like, I have a very, very full, busy life. There's a lot on, and still I find myself in spaces where I need to prioritize slowing down. I need to take a beat. And I was speaking about this in my heart space container a couple of months ago. I'm like, slowing down can be as simple as slowing down the pace we talk, slowing down the pace we walk when we're doing our grocery shopping, slowing down when we're in the car and we're 2 kilometers over the speed limit, slowing down. Like, it doesn't have to be, okay, I'm just going to cancel every bloody thing in my calendar and like lie around in spaciousness all day, because let's be real, that isn't the way that we work. But it can just be in the really simple moments when you're brushing your teeth. Can you slow down the pace of that? Like, find the things you do every day and add an element of slow to them. And what's going to happen is you are going to start to breathe a little deeper and allow yourself, even in the chaos of life, even when life is very full and stressful and busy, you're going to be able to find those moments of pause. I think for me, personally, there's always a societal belief and construct we're buying into, but I also think there's probably a personal story at play. For me personally, I've always felt like I'm running out of time. There's not enough time. I need to do all these things now. And that's something that I definitely still have to work with. And I work with that in kinesiology sessions. I work with that in catching myself when I'm rushing and then going, okay, Holly, take a few breaths, like slow it down. I catch myself in that when I'm very conscious not to rush my little girl. I'll never say hurry up or quick or any of these things, because I want her to know it's okay to take it slow. It's okay to rest when you need to, all of these beautiful, nourishing things that are a right for all of us. And especially since becoming a mother has made me catch myself and go, what am I modeling to her? And how can I just allow her to see a woman that is resting when she needs it? Like, my little girl knows when I'm on my bleed, and she knows what that means. Like, when I'm lying down, she'll say, it's so cute. She'll say, oh, mummy have her period. Mummy need to rest. She's 3. She's 3. What do you
so
mean? But it's like these sorts of things that I'm instilling in her, because we didn't get that. For the most part, I'm speaking for myself here, but we saw the burned out, rushing off her feet, never stopping, juggling all the things, mother or sister or aunt or grandmother. And while we can do it all the time, is that actually serving us from a nervous system space? Likely not. Likely we need to just pump the brakes a little bit, slow it down, know that we're not running out of time, and that the world isn't going to implode on itself if we take a moment to just be or rest or sit with ourselves. In fact, the world will be better for it if we did that more.
Absolutely. And it's almost a case of unlearning and disconnecting yourself from that false sense of urgency that we, and I think it's us tuning into the collective too, of just like rushing and pushing, and we want it done yesterday. And it is beneficial for us to be driven and go after the things that we want and all of that, and have, you know, ambition. But particularly as women, it is so important that we honor where we're at, particularly in our cycles. And like you said, being a role model for our children or the younger generations, to know that it is okay to not be on 24/7 and
24, and that's
to
the
rest.
thing. Yeah, it's not a 24/7 thing. It doesn't mean you're not doing the thing. Like, I've published 2 books. I'm a mum. I do big things with my life. Achievement is huge. I have 3 Capricorn placements. I'm a high achiever. I speak about it all the time. It matters to me. And I will never be someone who will feel satisfied with being a stay-at-home mum and that being it. And there's no judgment. I have full-blown respect, and I am a stay-at-home mum. I'm the primary caregiver for my little girl, and I need to have outlets outside of that. And so I haven't wronged myself for the ambition I have outside of motherhood. I feel like that's an important part for me. But the other piece is, a lot of the time, if you have experienced some form of trauma, especially in childhood or even in adulthood, what can happen is we develop this sense of hyper independence, or just like hyper availability, or just hyper full stop. And so we're constantly going and doing and being, and it's because it's a safety mechanism in our body. We actually feel safer to be busy. We feel safer to wear all the hats. We feel safer to constantly go, go, go. It actually doesn't feel safe for us to stop or to slow down. And so, sitting in a yin yoga practice or sitting in a cacao ceremony that I'm such an advocate for can feel really uncomfortable to start with, because our nervous system goes on high alert, goes into fight and flight. It goes, something's going to happen because I'm stopping. And what's important is that we start to train ourselves that no, it's actually safe to slow. It's safe to rest. And the only way we can train ourselves of the safety in that is to expose ourselves to those experiences time and time again, for us to recognize, okay, I'm safe when I slow down.
Do you know what? After you said that, it made me think of the fact that I think there's a lot of us out there who are actually afraid to slow down, to do, like you said, yin yoga, cacao, meditation, whatever, because we're afraid to be with ourselves, because these are the times too that our emotions start to bubble up to the surface, and that's not comfortable for a lot of us to sit with. And so I think that's a really big part of it too.
That's what we're resisting. We're actually resisting our feelings, and I still do it. I have been doing it the last couple of weeks. I've caught myself. I've said it to Trenny, my husband. I'm like, I'm completely dissociated now. I'm completely numb. I'm not feeling. I'm just getting on with things, but I'm not letting it stop there. I'm going to sit with cacao this evening. I'm going to sit a ceremony, and I'm going to let myself feel what needs to be felt. I've booked myself into a somatic release, some trauma releasing, which I talk about in the book, for next week, so I can move it through my body. It doesn't always mean that when you sit with yourself, you're going to have a big cry session. It could be anger. I speak about that in the book. It's like, when I was in this compound trauma, complex PTSD, it wasn't sadness, it was rage. I was feeling anger like I've never felt anger before. And so we're scared to sit with self. And it was actually motherhood that made me sit with myself. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything but be at home with my baby. And all of the anger started bubbling to the surface because I was forced to sit with myself. And so what's amazing about the practices in this book, and what I've learned and unlearned over time, is that if we're not carving out the space to slow down and be with ourselves and move through what needs to be moved through, it's going to bubble up anyway, in places and ways that are probably highly inconvenient, and also more deeply impactful to the people that we love. We don't want to be lashing out in anger at our family or our children. We don't want to be yelling or like throwing things or whatever the thing is. So it's actually vital for us as, people who are just deeply in responsibility for our own emotional well-being, to make the time to sit with ourselves, even in the discomfort of it, because what's coming up is coming out. And we want that to come out. We don't want it to stay dormant and stuck, because it will become suppressed emotion, which can lead to some form of inflammation, which can lead to some form of disease.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely important for us to feel and process those emotions and let that be okay, and maybe communicate that with people in your life as well, what you're
Yeah.
feeling and what you're going through where it feels appropriate.
Absolutely. And then what you do is you start to mirror to your loved ones how they can show up for themselves too. And it's not about saying you should do this, it's they watch you do the thing. And like Trenny has watched me in the last couple of years, I've been at some of the lowest points of my entire life, like really dark points, and I pulled myself out. And he has also experienced his own, transition into parenthood that's really pummeled him down. But he's now going for runs for the first time in like 10 years. He's actually doing breath work and ice baths. Like it's fine. It's like he thrives in that. Like he has his weekly practices and rituals where he's sitting with himself and moving his energy through. And it's because he's just witnessed me do that for myself. And so he's found the things that work for him. Very different. You're not catching me going for a run and then jumping in an ice bath. It's not happening. But he's got his own outlet. And so this is what will start to happen. You start to show up for you. Other people in your life will find ways to do the same for themselves. So you create these beautiful ripples as well.
Yeah, that's right. And being the example and
Yes.
walking the path and inspiring others to do the same.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to switch gears a little bit now, Hol, as we move towards kind of the last part of our conversation. In the book, you share that when you birthed your little girl, that you felt as if you kind of lost yourself a little bit. And I think so many of us can relate to this, whether it is being initiated into parenthood or, losing a relationship or a job or, like you said, any other big life transition. So I'd love for you to speak to how we can start to reconnect or rekindle our relationship with ourself again, and how we can really allow our authentic self to step forward even through tough times, and especially through tough times, because they're often the catalyst for big change and growth.
Yeah. It was a concept that I discovered in my research for this book, and it's known as identity diversity. So what actually happened for me in the experience of becoming a mother is all of my identity I had unknowingly wrapped up in me being the business owner. I'd unknowingly wrapped up all of my sense of worth, value, what I had to offer, how good I felt about myself. It was all intrinsically connected to I am a business owner, the work that I did in the world that I loved so much. I'm able to work with these beautiful women all over the world. I run programs that I feel so good about. I'm making excellent money to support my husband and myself. And, every identifying factor before I became a mother was about my work. When I became a mother, my work could no longer exist in the way that it did. And I hadn't anticipated that. I was naive enough to, and I think we all are to a degree, to step into it and go, oh, things will just be the same. I'll just have a child. Like it's just all going to be the same. It just all fell in on itself. And so what ended up happening, how I started to find myself again, was diversifying my identity. This is a concept, and it's an actual concept. And I've got my book here because I wanted to read a quote about it from the book. So Brad Stulberg, he's the author of Master of Change, How to Excel When Everything is Changing, Including You. So a great book to reference in a period of life where your life is completely on its head. And he explains that the more you define yourself by any one activity, the more fragile you become. He says, if that activity doesn't go well, or when there is inevitable chaos or change, you lose a sense of who you are. So the opposite is self-complexity, a term researchers use for having multiple components to your identity. The key to a strong identity is to diversify your sense of self. Now, when I found that piece of research around identity diversity, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I had unknowingly done. So what I had actually done in my first 2 years of postpartum was seek out community theatre. Now, that is something that I hadn't thought about since I was in high school and really, really loved performance, really loved drama, loved the school musicals. Like, it was a part of me that I really, really loved. And it's a part of me that I really left behind when I stepped into adulthood. But when I felt incredibly lost in motherhood and felt so stuck in being defined by just this one role of mother, I, at a subconscious level, knew I needed something outside of that. I needed something that was just mine. I needed community that was new to me. And I needed an outlet that felt fulfilling, fun, playful, and creative. And that's when I found myself in an audition room for a new production that the local community theatre group was putting on. I speak in detail about this in the book. About what ended up happening was I've met some of my closest friends. They are a whole new community to me that are completely separate to me being a mother. When I am with them, I am Hollie the performer. I am Hollie in joy in a different way. I'm Hollie in her light, and I'm able to be celebrated by them for things outside of how I make money, what I do for work, that I am a mother, that I am in a loving relationship. Like, all of that matters because it matters to me, but it's not why I'm celebrated in that community. And so the thing I think people need to start to think about ongoing is, where is my identity diversified? Where do I have identity diversification, or where have I put all my eggs in one or two baskets? Because, as that quote even says, change is inevitable. Something is going to happen at some point where, your business might not be succeeding as well as you're used to, or you might not get the book deal you were banking on, or the relationship you're in that you've defined yourself with for 20 years ends up, falling apart at the seams. Or, what, insert the thing that you are defining yourself by. We have to have other outlets. We have to have eggs in multiple baskets. So things for us to think about are, what are the roles that you really value highly that you already have in your life? And how can you start to build out from them? What is a creative, or I believe it's a creative and or community group where you're not making money. It's nothing to do with business or work. It's not like a networking thing where, it's nothing to do with that. It could be like my husband going to his breathwork and ice bath on a Friday. He's with a new community. It has nothing to do with him as the husband or the father. He's going there and fulfilling a need for him, meeting with other people who are doing the same for them, and it's a different outlet. So, if life fell apart in one way or another, he still has that to go to where he's going to feel like himself. For other people, it could be hobbies. It could be, you have a baking hobby or a cooking hobby, or you love to read fiction, or, what are the hobbies that you've cultivated? I speak about a lot of this in the first book, but really, like, when I wrote that first book, I had no hobbies. I remember when the author form came in, it was like, what are your hobbies? And I was like, spending time with my husband. Like, no, Hollie, like, we need to diversify ourselves. Like, now it's like community theater. That is my thing. I had this conversation with a girlfriend of mine, and she was really confronted and triggered by it, to be honest, because it made her look at herself and go, oh my God, outside of mothering and my work, which was all about mothering, she had no hobbies. She had no outlets that were just hers. And so she started free diving. Like, I have friends who have taken up DJing in their 40s. Like, like dance, whatever the thing is, it's like, how can you seek out an outlet that is equally yours as the relationship, as the friendships that you've had forever, as the motherhood, as the business, as the what you do for work? It's you are so much more than the labels you are currently giving yourself, but allow yourself to discover how much more you can be.
Do you know, I think that's actually such a common thing for us. But as adults, we kind of lose that playfulness and we lose those hobbies and that connection to joy. And I was just thinking, as you were saying that, even something like the journaling practice and those times when even if it's just a few minutes when we're taking that time for ourselves, that is a really good opportunity as well for you to tune in and be like, hey, like, who am I outside of all of these labels that I've accumulated as I've gone through my life? And also, like, what brings me joy? Like, what do I like to do? What did I do, like, before I decided to be a serious grown-up adult? Like,
Yes.
how can we start to bring more joy in it and start to connect with those other lighter, more playful parts of ourselves.
Yeah, what did you do as a kid that you loved? Were you writing like fiction stories in your bedroom at night, late at night, or were you like, I'm emceeing a poetry night on the weekend because I love poetry? It's like we don't have to be defined by just the one thing. Like, what did you love when you were younger, and how can you go and seek more of that out? Do you want to go to an open mic night, grab your guitar that you haven't played in 10 years, and sing to an audience, or it could just be singing in your bedroom to start with. Whatever the thing is, we all have things that we used to love when we were kids, and that points to so much of who we are before we put the layers and layers of seriousness over the top of them. But this is actually where we're going to start to diversify our sense of self, because I tell you what, if I had my community theatre group when I went through that first year of motherhood, I would have had a radically different experience. Absolutely. I know without a doubt I would have, because I still had something that was mine outside of motherhood and outside of work, which for me, it was business and work that completely crumbled. And so I would have still had identity. And so it is about just starting to and play with it. It doesn't have to be the first thing you pick. I do think an aspect of having community there is important, but just getting an understanding of who you are at deeper levels is it's so important. It's so vital.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on one last point before we wrap up, Holly, and that is talking about how we can shine bright. The final chapter of your book is all about this shining bright. And I said in the notes for our episode here, I feel like we should be singing Bachelor Girls Permission to Shine, which
Honestly, like
is
insert. Yes.
it's always in a lot of your playlists too, which I love.
It's literally, I'll tell
Like
you
the
something funny
anthem.
about that song. I'll tell you something funny. I literally just auditioned for the next musical up here and I sang that song.
Oh my God.
I was like, it just feels fitting.
It's the anthem.
It's the anthem.
um, but I mean, a lot of us feel scared to shine for whatever reason. That could stem all the way back to childhood, like we were speaking about right at the start of our conversation. We're scared to shine. We're scared to fail. We're worried about what people think of us, whatever the story is. So, how can we give ourselves permission to shine? And what are the ways that you've found that have helped you to do that as well?
It's a huge part of the book. And as I was writing it, I'm like, God, this could be a book in itself. Like, because honestly, it flowed through me as I was writing it, because naturally I am inclined to be a more shiny person by nature. It is something that's come a little bit more naturally to me. I think part of it is literally born this way. I also am of the view that life is short, that sense of urgency, right, that I feel, and like I want to make the most of it. And so part of that means that I can't just sit in the sidelines of my life. I want to be in it actively and fully. But when I was sitting down and writing this book, in fact, I pull it out, when I came to the section around shining, I actually took to my community on Instagram and I said, what are the reasons that we aren't shining? Because I was really curious, as someone who, hasn't come up against too much fear. I mean, I absolutely still care about what people think of me. That's my biggest piece. But I was curious about the other ones. And so there are a few. They were, what will people think of me was the biggest one. I will be judged or criticized for this, which is an extension of what will people think of me. I don't want to be too much. Again, what will people think of me if I appear as too much? I don't feel like I'm enough was another one. So that's a little bit different to what will people think of me. That's verging on imposter syndrome, which I unpack in the book. And then it goes, I'm an imposter. Who do I think I am to desire this life? And then the most interesting one for me was, what if I fail? The fear of failure. I might as well not try, because what if I get this wrong? So there are a multitude of deeply rooted subconscious beliefs we hold around shining. The first step is to get clear on what yours is. And it might be a multitude at play. You could have all of them. I know for me, in my example, is I am mostly fearful of what people will think of me. And I have built that fear based on evidence that it's dangerous to shine. I share experiences in the book where I've been publicly shamed more than once, from as young as 19, when I was in a video on the homepage of YouTube Australia, and the comments, you can read about it. It was appalling. And for a 19-year-old girl, that embedded in me, imbued in me, that it's not safe. we also live in a country where tall poppy syndrome is much higher than many other places. And I speak about why that is in the book. We unpack tall poppy syndrome. The antidote, in my opinion, to tall poppy syndrome is actually being around celebration. And the only way you're going to be around celebration to feel celebrated is to cultivate and nurture the relationships that celebrate you. So part of me feeling safe and shining has actually me been evaluating the people in my life where I feel celebrated, the people in my life where I actually feel belittled or not celebrated, and having to make really brutal calls on who I allow in my inner circle and who I don't. Because again, it's a safety piece. If we don't feel safe in shining, we're not going to do it. If we don't feel safe in showing up as our brightest, most excited, beautiful version of ourselves, if that feels dangerous, then we're not going to do it. One of the biggest ways for us to feel safe is that we have a community of people around us who go, yes, girl, share more of that. I love to see it. Like hype girling up in the comments. Now, what's important is, as much as we want to attract that in our immediate circle, we also need to be giving that back. We also need to be celebrating people when they are doing the thing that, I mean, I talk about cringe in the book because you will make yourself cringe when you are showing up as your true authentic self, because you're going to be judging yourself as much as, if not more than, a lot of people who are out there in the world probably wanting to be doing what you're doing. So it's becoming okay with cringe. I'll tell you what, me being out there in the world, promoting my book, shining, sharing very personal stories in this book, it's not easy. It's not like I'm sitting there and being like, I'll just pop this out there in the world and then go spread word. Like, it's literally, I make myself cringe on the regular. Like when I auditioned for that musical and sang Permission to Shine, I wanted to die inside. I was like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable for me. But unfortunate reality is that is not going anywhere. And I think sometimes we wait for the cringe, for the discomfort, for the, oh my gosh, I feel super safe to do this. We wait for that to disappear. It's not going anywhere. We've got to face off with that and go, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling in fear. I do feel celebrated by these people in my life. I'm going to stretch my capacity. Again, it's that nervous system capacity to feel the discomfort and the cringe. Despite what I'm feeling, the shine is actually what I'm seeking, and I want to be in that. So I'm going to push myself into that. So there are a multitude of reasons why we don't, but one of the biggest practices to still stretch yourself into shine is to feel the discomfort, be aware of what it's embedded in, and create spaces where you still feel safe enough to stretch yourself into whatever your definition of shine is. The shiniest people for me, and I speak about this in the book, it's not just the people who are like the most successful or the most, I speak about, they have the most followers on Instagram. It's not that. It's none of that. You guys will know this listening to this. Think of a shiny person in your life. It's their energy. It's the energy that they emit. It's how inclusive they are of people. It's how honest and authentic they are. It's how kind they are. So this is actually about you going out and living a really heart-centered life, trusting that people are going to feel that, and then sharing more of your light in the world. That's what shining is about. Shining is not being a spectator of your life because it's too scary, so I'm just not going to step onto the stage, because it's not an unfortunate reality. It actually is just fact. If you're not stepping fully into your life, you'll never live a full life. So part of stepping fully into your life is being okay with the discomfort that arises and doing the work to sit with that discomfort. And that's what I speak about in that. This is why I said this whole chapter could be a whole book, because it's like, okay, well, how do I actually face off with these limiting beliefs, these experiences that I've had in the past that have told me it's not safe? And there are a multitude of ways that we can do that, of which they are all dissected in that section of the book.
Yeah, there's a few parts of that, isn't there? It's like we have to do the work of, feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and unpacking these limiting beliefs that we might hold. But also, like you said, there are time, we only have, a finite amount of time in this lifetime. And so we are really doing ourselves a disservice if we're not being our brightest self, our shiniest self, our authentic self. And we all have our own unique magic that we're here to share. And it's obviously going to look so vastly different for all of us. And some of us, it will be quite literally being on stage doing something in that sphere. And for someone else, it's going to be something really different. So it's just tuning into what it is for you and giving yourself permission to do that, and not looking back on your life in 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years later and wishing that you had given yourself that permission to do that.
It's one of the top 5 regrets of the dying, isn't it? Like, I wish I did the thing I wanted to do. And if anything, without it sounding morbid, like, let your impending death be your motivation. Like, honestly, like, let it motivate you, because that is the one thing that is guaranteed for each of us. So what do you want to make? And that's been my motivator my entire life. Is I know I've only got finite time here in this lifetime. And so I want to live the biggest, bravest, boldest, shiniest version I possibly can. And when I forget, then I come back to that. I'm like, what would I feel so disappointed in myself if I hadn't done that thing on my final day? What would I be like? I wish I had done that. And can I just be completely honest, other than like travel to some vital places I really want to get to, when it comes to the work I want to do in the world and the way that I'm showing up in my life, there is nothing that I could happily go, I've done all the things I've wanted to do and I will continue to. So it's about that. It's like thinking, going, what haven't I done? Why haven't I done it? How can I move through the resistance? Because you deserve it. And that is why you're here. You're here to live. Life is to be lived fully. I am such a believer of like, even in amongst, like, if I could, I won't share with you the depth that I have been traversing the last 2 weeks. It's very fitting that this book is coming out around the same time that I am literally in a grief portal right now. I'm literally facing off with some of the darkest experiences anyone close to me has ever faced off with. And yet I can still show up and do this because life is my motivator. I am here to live, and I am here to live the way that is best for me. And I think of the little version of me, my inner child. I dedicate the book to my inner child, and she is my motivator, and she has to be all of our motivators. Like, if you can't do it for you now, do it for her, because you deserve it and she deserves it.
Oh, every time you bring up inner child, it always gets me, especially
Yeah.
in our cacao ceremonies. It's so true.
Yeah.
Hollie, this has been incredible, and you are such an inspiration for all of us to do just that, to shine brightly and to chase your dreams and whatever that looks like for you and for all of us. So thank you for being such a shining light and a strong example for all of us to do that. I just want to make sure, is there anything else that you'd love to share? We've covered a lot throughout
We
our
have covered a lot.
conversation.
I'm like, we really touch a lot of bases. No, I do think like the piece that I did want to wrap up with was that inner child piece. And it's the bit that gets us the most emotional, because there's so much. That's where we're purest of heart. That's where fear hasn't crept in too much yet. That's probably the time we've been highly impressionable and started to take on things that aren't ours. So any work you can do in reconnecting back with that little version of you, even if it's just sitting and thinking, what did she enjoy doing? What does she need from me? Let that be the motivator if you get stuck. And yeah, like, when it comes to personal development, there is a multitude of practices and teachers and modalities available at our fingertips. It's amazing. And also, trust in what you're drawn to. Trust in what feels true for you. It can get overwhelming when we're taking on all of the stuff outside of ourselves. So find practices that bring you back to you and then go from there. That's the first step. It doesn't have to be too confusing or overloaded or overwhelming.
Yeah, just keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Hollie, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of your wisdom and lessons and learnings from your entire lifetime, and in particular these past few years where you've been really in the trenches and doing the work. So thank you so much. Can you just share with us where we can find you, connect with you, work with you, and also, of course, share with us where we can grab a copy soon of your new book, Saying Yes to You?
Yay! Thank you so much for having me, Beck. I've just loved talking about it. You got me so excited. I'm like, this is just, I'm so excited to spread the word. So yes, you can connect with me over on Instagram. It's just my name, which I'm sure you'll see in the show notes. I tend to hang out mostly on Instagram over there, but I also do write on Substack. I'm loving Substack, actually. So if you wanted to come and just read some, long form kind of essay style writings, I write about everything and everything, but my premise is simple ways to cultivate a beautiful life. So you can hang out with me over on Substack. too. I have a beautiful monthly membership, the Heart Space, of which Beck is a member, and we gather twice a month and sit with cacao. It's another beautiful practice, obviously, of sitting with self and honoring our hearts. So I'm actually so excited for Cass's ceremony on Friday. I can't wait to just receive. So you can, work with me over there. And if you wanted to find a copy of the book, Saying Yes to You, it's on shelves from the 25th of March. So literally 2 weeks today, which is very exciting. And you can find her sitting on the shelf at your favorite independent bookseller. She'll also be on Booktopia and all of the places you find your favorite books. She'll also be in Kmart. I'm calling her she because clearly Kmart and Big W and all of those fun places too. So if you do end up having a copy, I'd love to see a photo of you with her. Slide them into my DMs, please, because it gets me really excited.
It never gets old.
Never gets old. Yeah, you know, Beck, you know, it never gets old. Literally, it's so exciting.
Oh, Holly, thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom and your light with us today. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for having me, Beck. It's been an honor. Thank you.
I absolutely loved this conversation with Holly. I could have talked to Holly about all kinds of things for much longer, but I hope you enjoyed this episode, this conversation where we really dive deep and we really get to the heart of so many really important things that we all experience in this life. So I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you go out and grab a copy of Holly's new book, Saying Yes to You. Make sure you go over and connect with Holly on Instagram as well. Her handle is at Hollie_Azzopardi, and also connect with Holly over on Substack as well. Come and connect with me on Instagram as well. My handle is at BeckRussell_, and you can tag us if you're listening to this episode and let Holly and myself know what you loved about this episode and what maybe practices or rituals or routines you're going to extract from this episode and implement into your life as well. That's it for another episode of the Health Source podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here as always. And until next time, take really good care of yourself, and I'll chat to you again soon.